Critters 2, the main course.
I really liked Critters. I had a good time with it. It was very Spielbergian, sort of a modern-day Western, but with little monsters. And one of the things I really like about the Critters world, and in particular Critters 2, is one of my favorite themes of Norman Rockwell Goes to Hell. So this is taking the idealized small-town America and just kicking it in the balls.
The hell was in you?
My main job was try to create some characters who were memorable and just not fodder for little puppets. The cast was wonderful. Lynn Shay and Scott Grimes and Leanne Curtis and Barry Corbin, a really good group of people. And the Kyoto brothers were amazing.
You know, one person operates the hand movement while one person moves the arm movement, so that has to be coordinated.
They made these amazing creations on no money. Another memorable moment in Critters 2 that stretches the boundaries of the PG-13 rating is when one of the alien bounty hunters picks up the Playboy magazine and sees the fold-out and transforms into Roxanne Kernahan, naked. A really great idea that Bob Shea, the head of New Line Studios, had when we were doing the scene with the fold-out. When she transforms and plucks the giant staple out of her navel, that was Bob's idea, and I have to give him credit because it's so good. The most complicated scene, maybe to this day, that I've ever shot is that chase between the pickup truck and the giant critter ball. Because there are several different versions of that critter ball. One of them must have weighed a ton and was on an axle connected to the pickup truck. And it had all these remote control puppeted faces that are biting on it. There's another version, it's just a bunch of critter pelts on an inflatable ball that when it first comes into town, you can see two of the Kyoto brothers' legs behind it as they're pushing it. That's real high-tech visual effects. But when the Critters ball is rolling, one of the people running away from it gets rolled over and reveals the skeleton of him immediately after. You hear gobble, 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 and it's away, and there's a skeleton with a little meat left on it. That's a favorite moment of mine and always gets an amazing reaction.
Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood.
Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, is the first one with Kane Hodder as Jason, which is surprising that the most famous Jason came in during the 7th movie. The really memorable thing about this movie is, of course, the psychic character Tina, who serves as the first person who can actually stand up to Jason and fight back. And it was directed by the late John Carl Buechler, who did a fantastic job with it.
The single reason I ever became Jason was his insistence that I play the character, because nobody was against CJ coming back from Part 6. He had done a good job. I still think he did a good job, but Buechler was adamant that I play the character. Unbelievable honor. I said, I have to do whatever I can to do this character justice. Tina has a vision of me killing Bill Butler with a tent stake, so it's sticking out of him and I'm standing behind him and he's going like that. That's the very first thing I ever shot with the hockey mask on, so that'll always be a cool memory. My favorite fire stunt I've ever done is as Jason in Part 7, because there is so much fire on me. I'm on fire for so long. Just an amazing looking stunt. Everybody was afraid to offer me a fire stunt because one almost killed me. I was in the hospital 5.5 months. It took a year to fully recover and get back to a somewhat normal life. Even though it almost killed me, I always looked back and said, man, I just liked doing fire stunts because they were so scary looking.
With Kane Hodder behind the mask, Jason undergoes a ton of punishment. He gets a house fallen on him and electrocuted and nails stuck in him. But then his ultimate death comes from the hand of like a zombie dad coming out of the lake and dragging him underwater. It's totally bizarre and a little rushed, but you definitely remember it.
Killer clowns from outer space. It's crazy.
One of the movies I would point people to is Killer Clowns from Outer Space by the amazing Chiodo brothers. This is a movie that is not long on plot, but is rich in incident. The designs for the killer clowns, let's face it, always being kind of creepy, are really, really, really disturbing.
The horror is there. The comedy, they keep it consistent. They're killing people with pies. They're taking people and wrapping them up in cotton candy.
Lon Chaney once said that the clown is funny in the circus ring, but he's not funny at your door at midnight. These guys are at your door at midnight, and even though the story is ridiculous, it's filled with strange slapstick violence.
Knock my block off.
Really, gives it a special place in my heart.
Phantasm 2.
When I got the script of Phantasm 2, it wasn't called Phantasm 2. It was called either American Gothic or Morningside. It went through different versions. It was top secret. You get to page 2 and it says The Tall Man. Like, I think I can figure out what it is. Angus Scrimm and his tall man character couldn't be further apart. Angus was the sweetest, most gentle human being. A wonderful actor, just a sweet, gentle soul. When he becomes the tall man, he just switches it on and and then switches it off, and he's Angus. Yeah, I love working with him.
It's so clear that they had a big budget on the sequel. They were able to do a lot of the concepts that Don Coscarelli had with the original that he couldn't fully flesh out because they just didn't have the money.
Steve Patino created a ton of different spheres for the film. He did a wonderful job. Spheres for flying, spheres for dropping, spheres that had a little blade come out and start spinning, and spheres just for blood pumping. He had, dozens of these things for different effects. Anytime you got that completely shiny chrome ball on set, it's basically a mirror reflecting everything around it, including the film crew. So you had to be very clever about how you shot it, like through a hole in the wall or something so the camera wouldn't be seen. We had a lot of fun with them. I even tried one on myself.
My favorite scene has to be when the ball is chasing the dude through the mausoleum and it just comes up right in his head, and you're like, oh, that sucks. And then the drill comes out. Not expecting that at all. And his blood flying everywhere, drills through the guy's brain. It's insane. It's so well done.
Phantasm 2, in terms of its effects, takes the whole franchise to a completely different level. And I don't think any of the films since have ever touched what the work in Phantasm 2 is like, because I think that really set a bar for that whole series.
The Blob. Terror has no shape.
The Blob is a film that I think deserves to be up there with The Thing and The Fly as one of the great 80s remakes. It's really an example of how you can take an older film and use the new cinematic technology and really tell the story in the best possible way.
It's a monster that doesn't really get quite the recognition that it deserves. They had a much bloodier story. It was different from the original. It made the Blob an even bigger force to be reckoned with. Here you have this thing from outer space that is just a mindless killing machine. It's just carving a path of destruction across this town, eating everybody in its way. It kills a theater full of children. It's just something that they would have a hard time getting away with today.
A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 4. The Dream Master.
The fourth Nightmare on Elm Street film, The Dream Master, picks up where the Dream Warriors left off and then quickly just kills all the survivors from that movie.
How's this for a wet dream?
Kincaid is the first African American to ever survive a major horror film and return to a sequel. But I think they forgot because in part 4 they killed my black ass off during the credits almost. So I used to tell people, if you want to see me, don't get popcorn, don't get no drinks, go straight to the theater. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, then you can go get some drinks. We actually filmed that in a junkyard, and it took us a week to film that scene. It was where Freddy came back to life, and it was because of my dog that was named Jason. Jason? And the dog pissed fire. And that's what brought him to life. If you go back and look at it, Robert Englund had developed a swag about himself, and put on his hat, and he said, "You shouldn't have buried me.
You shouldn't have buried me."
He stuck his razors into my chest and grabbed my heart. I think he was supposed to pull it out, but that was going to be too gross.
It goes on to feature a new bunch of kids fighting Freddy in their dreams, including the Dream Master, which is an all-new thing that this movie came up with. My favorite effect from the movie is done by Screamin' Mad George, who's really good with bug effects, and it's when Debbie becomes a cockroach. We're talking full-on Gregor Samsa here. She just turns into this gross, gooey, icky cockroach who's got antenna and limbs popping out before she's ultimately crushed in a roach motel by Freddy with a one-liner.
You can check in, but you can't check out.
Ken Russell's The Lair of the White Worm.
Ken Russell was a very distinctive filmmaker who had a very distinctive point of view that was slightly mad. He took on a Bram Stoker short story called Lair of the White Worm. Amanda Donahoe plays this priestess of the white worm, sort of. It's crazy, it's funny, it's really haunting and spooky. Lair of the White Worm also has one of the first performances of Hugh Grant, and he's the fumbling, charming guy that we all expect.
Well, you mustn't take the word worm too literally. It's an adaptation of the Anglo-Saxon Wyrm, meaning dragon or snake. Gothic Worms, German Wurm, it's all the same word.
But it's in the British countryside, and it has to do with curses and ancient religions and things, and it's very much a Ken Russell special. A really wonderful, unique movie that you would never expect came from a short story written by the same guy who wrote the book Dracula.
Elvira, Mistress of the Dark was just like a dream come true. We finally get to see Cassandra Peterson do an extended version of Elvira instead of her little hosting snippets. We get to see her personality, and we were not disappointed.
It became such a great way to make the character three-dimensional. Myself and the two writers that I worked with, John Paragon and Sam Egan. It was like a discovery every day, kind of about myself. It was almost like a therapy session. Here she is, this woman that looks like something between some kind of a sorceress, vampire, witch, we don't know what, and she wants to be a showgirl in Las Vegas, you know? It's like, it actually came from my real life, so. It was fun discovering who Elvira was.
She just went on a road trip where she's like a fish out of water, and the townspeople just want to crucify her. But we all know she's super cool.
I put my life on the line in that movie so many times, being surrounded by fire, first on the pyre up there, and then later when the house is burning down. That fire is real. I mean, my wig would have gone up with all that hairspray like a bomb. So I was covered from head to toe in flame retardant, which they failed to tell me made you itch like mad. And I had my hands tied behind my back, so I couldn't scratch myself. I was wanting to tear my skin off. Oh, it's making me itch right now.
Well, I hope you're hungry, because here's dinner.
We had the casserole monster scene, we call it. The pop monster was a puppet. The guys that were under the table had to get very, very close to me, and I was like, oh no, just come on, sit right here between my legs. And I guess they had a great time down there.
Such a good movie. It's so well done. And she was just a hero. To little horror girls like me, it's like, oh. So Pumpkinhead is an amazing film. It has Lance Hendrickson as the dad who loses his adorable little kid and understandably wants revenge. So he brings back this crazy monster, which is my favorite all-time monster ever. And revenge happens. It's makeup effects legend Stan Winston's directorial debut. And Tom Woodruff Jr. is the dude in the Pumpkinhead suit.
People ask, what was your favorite movie? And I always tell them it was Pumpkinhead. And he turned over the design aspects of that entire show to us, his guys, and we were going to design Pumpkinhead, and Stan was busy directing. So that was an affirmative nod from Stan to let us do that. We always wanted to make sure that we were delivering something to the audience that didn't seem like a guy in a rubber suit. We would do things like extend the legs with a leg extension to make them long and skinny, and the suit was very thin in places, so it didn't add a lot of bulk.
It was all practical, but it was a little bit of puppetry, it was a little bit man in suit, but I just loved the design of what Pumpkinhead was. There he was with this kind of bulbous head, but he was very demonic, he had this long tail, he was able to climb trees and take out people. Whenever Pumpkinhead was walking around, you can hear this weird chittering noise in the background. It sounded like cicadas, and you always knew if you heard that, you were doomed.
It was always hard for me in the suits to communicate, but if Stan would get close, I'd say, can we do the King Kong thing? And he goes, the thing with the T-Rex. So we both knew exactly what we were saying, and that was the thing where you pick up Joel's head and you kind of move it around a little bit and play with it. Even though this was an 80s movie, right, it extended much further before that from when we both each had seen King Kong, and we brought that into some kind of life for a moment.
Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers.
After Halloween 3 confused the hell out of everyone and bombed at the box office, they resurrected everyone's favorite slasher. Halloween 4 has Michael Myers returning to Haddonfield, this time to stalk his niece, Jamie Lloyd, played by a young Danielle Harris. My favorite kill in this one is mostly because of the victim, who is played by Kathleen Kinmont, wearing a very memorable shirt that says "Cops do it by the book." Michael just takes a shotgun, and instead of using it to shoot her, he impales her into the wall with the barrel of the shotgun. I think Halloween 4 is really the movie that made Michael into one of the iconic slashers. Michael Myers, you're just like Jason Voorhees.
Well, one of the things about the 80s, it was just different than my belief system, was the unrestrained capitalism that came into being. Reagan brought it in. The things that he implemented, I felt, were not real great for people, especially low-income folks. This greed is good business was, I couldn't believe it.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
They Live was the response.
John had upped his game as a director by the time we got to They Live. Its political significance and resonance is probably more acute today than it was even then.
Had to come up with a visual device that showed the audience the hidden reality around them. And so the sunglasses were a perfect metaphor.
What's your problem?
Jim Danforth did these matte paintings, and they would work in black and white with sunglasses. Perfect for our low budget.
Subliminal messages put in advertising. They Live addressed it head bang on. You don't know what messages are being broadcast to us today. That's not necessarily an alien concept.
Put these on. Hey! Stay away from me! I'm telling you, you dumb son of a...
The fight in They Live was fun to stage. We rehearsed it for quite a while. Roddy's a wrestler, and he fights for a living, so we had to put a big fight in. The guy I'm impressed with is Keith. He did great.
We rehearsed it for like 2 weeks. It was very well choreographed, very well designed, fashioned after the fight in Quiet Man. We had such fun. I'd never felt safer in a fight in my life than with Roddy. You know, he taught me more about selling it and a few great moves.
Roddy gave me a notebook of his that had lines that he would give for interviews and at wrestling matches.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
That was one he had written down, made up for, I think, Playboy Buddy Rose in a match they had together. So I just used it.
Rod and I became good friends. And over the years, you know, we would see each other and hang out every once in a while. One of the sweetest, most gracious human beings I've ever known.
I don't think there's been a movie quite like They Live. It stands alone in terms of its reference to the politics of the times and so forth.
I came here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
I wanted to do a killer doll movie, and I saw the commercial potential there. When we were little kids, all of us had thought to ourselves, wouldn't it be cool if our toys and playthings came alive? Or wouldn't it be terrifying? You saw it in Poltergeist with Tobe Hooper with the clown coming out from under the bed. And it was like the biggest scare in the movie. That moment made me want to do Child's Play if I could pull it off.
I wanted Chucky to be a darkly humorous figure. You know, in a way, you can sort of reduce Chucky's appeal, if you're so inclined, to a cute little doll that says fuck a lot and knifes you to death.
So long, John.
There is something amusing about that because it's inherently absurd.
Who's going to believe a little 7-year-old kid about his doll coming alive? With any kind of movie like Child's Play, in order to make it believable, you have to have that moment where you say, look, Ma, no wires.
Chucky's alive, really. Andy, Chucky. Chucky's a doll. He's made of plastic and stuffing.
The scariest moment in Child's Play is probably when Catherine Hicks finally realizes that her son, her little boy, has been telling the truth and the doll is malevolently alive. And she opens the compartment and there are no batteries in there. Okay, good. But then you get The Exorcist. The head does a 180-degree turn and looks up at her and says,
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Scares the hell out of her. And then I put Brad Dourif's voice behind it. And Brad had played the villain for me in Fatal Beauty.
Kevlar, bitch!
It's the fiendish glee that Chucky has.
You stupid bitch! You filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
Chucky subverts the status quo, and he goes after authority figures, and he has his way with them. I think the appeal of the killer doll trope is partly primal and maybe Freudian. I think as long as there are flashlights and you can turn them on under a chin, under a doll, a sort of no-fail prescription for terror right there.
Hellbound, Hellraiser 2.
Hellbound is really the story of Kirsty's descent into hell to look for her father.
The house. My father's house.
Dr. Channard, who as well as being a brain surgeon, has also developed his own fascination with lament configurations. The blood brings Julia back to life out of the mattress. She becomes Dr. Channard's kind of pet. I talked to Clive, obviously, a lot about the character of Pinhead, and I knew he had been a human being. I developed the idea that he was in mourning for a humanity that he couldn't remember clearly. The opening sequence with Elliot Spencer acquiring the box and being transformed into Pinhead. At the end of the film, we see the transformation back when Kirsty confronts him with that photograph of Elliot Spencer, and he remembers the humanity that he had lost.
Hellraiser 2, it gave you an insight into the Cenobites that wasn't really there with the first one. Favorite scene from that is when the doctor is being turned into a Cenobite. And then after he comes out of the chamber, he's like,
And to think, I hesitate.
it's so amazing because it's like he went through this hell and he didn't want to, but then he comes out afterwards and he's a Cenobite, and it's like, oh, this is what it's all about.
Shift in the exchange rates shaved a substantial chunk off the budget, and it was decided to go ahead in compromised form. And it's a shame. It would have given us that insight into where Clive's notions of this realm, this place where the Cenobites are, and the idea of Leviathan that is introduced in the screenplay but never really fully explored.
Troma is a classic cult movie studio. We're the last one. We're the only ones who've been able to survive, and the reason is our fans. We've got a fan base who are very devoted, and they're very active. And now, of course, with the internet, we've got 500,000 people every month with whom we are interacting. So that's the secret.
Even if the horror film is cheaply, badly made, horror fans will support you.
The fans, they're the best.
It's like you're meeting your people, you're meeting your tribe.
They are the most loyal, the most knowledgeable fan base that anybody could wish to have.
I feel like horror fans are some of the most self-actualized people because they allow themselves to see and experience the darker aspects of life.
We're all kind of the misfits. We're all, of culture, we're misfits.
A lot of us share the same sort of sense of not being the popular one, being the nerd or the geek, which sometimes, nowadays is sort of cool. Back then it was not cool. So you bond over these things. So as we get older and we find these groups of people on social media or at conventions, you have an immediate understanding and a bond over the genre.
Horror fans who love horror and who pass it down to their children are some of the most open people that I know.
Somebody will show me a picture of me at a horror convention holding an infant. They go, that's me. And they're now 25 years old. I held that person at a horror convention when they were still shitting themselves. And now they're standing in front of me with their own kids.
I've had people come up to me and have me sign my name, and then a couple hours later they've gone and tattooed my name on that. So they're like fans. Those are the real fans.
I've met horror fans from all walks of life. There is no stereotypical one, I don't think.
That's why it's hard to almost describe the average horror fan, because you can see someone walking down the street with a black shirt, that has a horror design on it or ink or whatever. And then you can also see someone who just came from a business meeting in a suit and tie, but then they'll pull up their pants a little bit to show you their horror socks.
A horror fan can be anyone. They're everywhere.
I'm a fan who found his way into the profession. I went to my first convention in 1975 in Pittsburgh, and it gave me a really unique sense of being connected with something that I loved. I still go to shows as a fan and sometimes as a guest. We celebrate it, we love it, we're passionate about it.
What I love about horror, it's this unifier. You can be from any walk of life. You can be straight, you can be gay, you can be white, you can be black. It doesn't matter. Horror knows no race, it knows no sex, it knows no age. Horror is this universal thing that we all come together over.